Everyone, this is Molly and Mario, and we're doing our show here, and we're excited because we're gonna do a really important one today. We're gonna do it on the Pluto return of the United States, and we're going to talk about how it's going to be happening for the next couple of years. We're gonna talk about we're going to talk a little at the end of the video. Well, we're going to talk about some solutions, some remedies. Molly's going to get into that. And at the end of the vid, I'm going to talk a little about the Pluto interregnum. We'll probably do a separate video on that, but I'll just like intro you guys into it. And then I'll mention for the Pluto return in what human design gate that Pluto is going to be in, which will be the same gate that the United States has in its birth chart. Its human design birth chart as well. And anything else? Anything you want to add to that, Molly?
Nope. You can just maybe share about what the Pluto return is, when it's happening.
So let me break that down a little. So as many of you know, the United States has a birth chart, and there's several different versions. We go with one of them that's July 4th, 1776. And so countries and nations, they have charts, and we could read them just like we read an individual's chart. And in that chart, the United States being born on July 4th, being Cancer, Pluto was in Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn. And it's returning to that same sign. And it started in 2008 is when Pluto went into Capricorn, but it's hitting the exact degree this year in February, right in these next couple weeks. We're about to kind of really get into the deep of it. Many astrologers argue this has been started since 2008. I think in November was the time it came in, and so many have argued that this buildup is not anything that we're clueless about. We're all experiencing a transformation on multiple levels, economic, material, spiritual, every level you can imagine. Upheaval is happening, destabilization is occurring, and we're slowly observing our systems slowly kind of dissolve into something, and we don't know what that something is. It's kind of like our Play-Doh. We're kind of messing around and seeing what we want to do and what we want to make out of things. And it's happening in the second house. Money. That's where Pluto is in the original birth chart of the United States, which I'm going to show in a minute. I'm going to let Molly kind of color that up for us. Molly, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen with Pluto returning to the second house where natal is?
Yeah, so whenever there's a return, hold on, there's a little background noise here. I'm just gonna mute real quick.
Want me to share the chart right now?
Yeah, please.
Okay, here we go.
Sorry, there was a motorcycle. I just wanted to share that so Pluto return, it's hard for us as individuals to fully conceive of it, simply because an individual never experiences a Pluto return because Pluto moves so slowly, maybe some years just 2 degrees a year, depending on how often it retrogrades, etc. So only empires, nations, countries can experience a Pluto return. So everything, we're sharing, or any astrologer is really sharing about what to expect, it's not a common thing. We do know what Pluto represents. We know Pluto is transformation. It's often the burning or destroying away of things that no longer serve in order to create and manifest more constructive evolution, you could say. And I think modern astrologers tend to harp on like the more negative connotations of Pluto, but it's a necessary energy. And yeah, it's transformation at its core. So in the second house, that's definitely going to be linked to the economy, finances. Second house is resources. It's just the simple, pure resources, food, things related to land. And also it represents values. So you might say that there's going to be a shift, a transformation undergoing the way we relate to resources, the way we relate to things like the dollar, how we determine what's valuable. We might have a shifting perspective in these times of what is considered the most valuable. I feel like that's already kind of evident where people are losing faith in kind of numbers in an account and putting more stock in things like the land that you have, or your ability to grow food, the skills you have, and maybe the tools, the more simple, basic tools that you have for self-sufficiency. In the birth chart was the Declaration of Independence. So the original Pluto in Capricorn, 27 Capricorn, was during this moment when the colonists were saying no taxation without representation. So we're seeing potentially an echo of this, where individuals or groups are creating their own constitutions, maybe wanting to revise that, wanting to be like, well, what is lawful? What are our rights? Because as we've seen with COVID, some of that's been brought into question. What are our rights? What is lawful, what is legal? And Mario, I know you have a lot to share about that, but those are just some of the themes I think that are emerging.
No, great, Molly, great. That's great. You colored everything up. I'm just gonna nuance and amplify a couple notes that you shared. The first is just a kind of reflection for many, especially those who are not so familiar with the specifics of the planets and what they represent. Just with Pluto, it's what we're understanding here, what we're understanding rather, if we're going to use common law and natural law language, right, is that Pluto represents more than anything, it represents the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. And it represents the exposure of that truth. That truth becoming evident, and all the falseness kind of dissolving away. And because of that, as Molly noted, there's been a very common references to Pluto as something destructive, as something, traumatic, as something as like representing fear, right? That many are speaking about as like a harvesting of humans, like putting us in states of fear and wanting us to die in states of fear, which is kind of the programming that we've all been experiencing when our decisions are coming under scrutiny. We live in, I'll put it like this, it's the best way to understand it. We live in a world that pretends that we have no choice. We live in a world that tries to convince us in every moment that we do not really have a clear choice. We always do, because we're sovereign beings. And if we're standing in our power, we are going to question until we're clear on what that choice is, if we are not right away clear. And Pluto represents this, and that's where we're all at. We're coming to the point where we're realizing that every single interaction is a contract. And everything we utter in response is creating law. Every decision we make, we're creating our law. This conversation I'm having with you all, that me and Molly are having with all of you, we're creating the new laws right now. And we're creating as we speak, as we utter it forth with the word. And this, just moving into the human design area of it, this specific gate that Pluto is moving into is gate 60. And that's the gate commonly called the gate of limitation. So within certain limits, we're going to be expressing our truth and reforming the world through our truth. So within those limitations, we're going to redefine in itself what those limitations are and dissolve the ones that are not correct. It's kind of like an energy, and Molly can touch on this too, because I know you got some stuff on this too. It's an energy where the best metaphor I can give is breath. For those who studied like breathing practices, you know that the body, the best practices, well, not the best, I should say, but the most natural practices to do with breathing is to allow the body to breathe itself, because that's what it does. The body breathes itself. We don't need to control every single thing with intentions. The outer planets is something that operates through us. We have a little more power when it comes to our personal planets. Our moon, which is our emotions, our sun, which is our personality, our Venus, which is our aesthetics, Mars, which is our drive, but the outer planets activate in through us. And it's the same on the national plane of different nations and empires. They operate through them, even though they might imagine they have more power because they're utilizing astrology sometimes. But yeah, Molly, do you want to touch on that? You want to touch on Pluto moving into gate 60?
Yeah, that gate is, I believe the keynote is by accepting limitation, one can achieve transcendence. So there may be themes of constriction that force us to adapt. And some astrologers, I've even heard this phrase associated with Pluto, like change or die. But it's kind of funny because dying is a change too, regardless. But the idea is that change, transformation is inevitable and it strengthens us. And so really being aware of these transits that if one isn't aware of can seem chaotic or potentially destabilizing. And I'm speaking there to the Saturn-Uranus square that we're going to be experiencing throughout the year as well. Yeah, just when we have the awareness, it doesn't have to be so shocking or so disturbing. We can then maybe work with those energies. And you brought up beautifully how breath is such a key free way that we can, a free tool really for, it's like activating that transformation inside of us. So I immediately think of things like Kundalini yoga, breath of fire, where it's all about tapping into your inner resource of power. I have some other kind of tools, or I don't want to say so much remedy, but maybe just tools that people can.
Yeah, sure. Share away.
Yeah, sure. So with Pluto, I connect it to the third chakra in the body. That's usually also attributed to the planet Mars. But it also, it's tricky because Pluto is a newer planet, so it doesn't always have the same like classical associations, but I definitely do think it connects with that third chakra, also called the Manipura chakra, and it's all about the transformational processes, our power. It's the one that's usually yellow, depicted in a yellow color. Mm-hmm. So I think of like for herbs and plants, things like ginger, really simple herb that really helps our digestive function, because our digestion to me is a very plutonic process in our body and very linked to our mental health and how we can digest other things in life, like a difficult conversation or scary news or, you know, an emotion that we're feeling.
Any traumatic incident, yeah.
Yeah, like how do we digest that? And so anything that can really strengthen the digestive functions. So yeah, things like turmeric, potentially, you know, that's not for every constitution, but ginger, you know, both this beautiful yellow color kind of corresponding with that chakra, you know, things like that, that remind us that we're always transforming, like all the cells in our body are, but when we eat every meal, we're essentially assimilating what we can use and eliminating toxins. So that's very much like a inner version of Pluto that's always happening with us to make it seem maybe more relatable and less scary. And then things like adaptogens, things that can help our bodies on a more full spectrum way deal with stress, just support the way that our body handles stress. So I like to use rhodiola. I make like a herbal coffee alternative with that, and I drink it a lot.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, you have some of that. Warming things like cinnamon, you know, those things that are like very comforting smelling and kind of warm your inner fire. Because ultimately, I think if we're feeling strong in our bodies. Yeah, we're just more resilient overall. So just some ideas there on to bring some plants to the planets.
Cinnamon also lowers blood pressure, just for those that, you know, get stressed out or getting, we're all going through more and more stress as the frequencies rise, you know, as we have to rise to meet them. So cinnamon's really good to lower blood pressure, you know, calm the body down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thanks for that. I want to just add, and this is like a larger theme that I will speak more about, and probably another video when I get into the Pluto interact when we get into the Pluto interregnum, and it's the idea that we really need to be looking at the ways we want to change the way. And Molly already mentioned this, but I'm just going to just kind of nuance part of this is we want to look at how we're living. We want to look at how we're picturing or what we want to have value in terms of exchange with others. Because we are building new communities, we are building new ways. Pluto represents in an individual chart the soul, and it gets the bad moniker of like the shadow self because we ignore our own soul, or we can't see it so clearly and discern what it is and what we're accumulating by not following our own laws, right? By betraying ourselves, as you know, as is the case with humanity to a certain degree, in its neglect of nature, or its destruction of nature, or its over control of nature. And I just wanted to mention that because it's really important that people really start looking at how you're living, how you want to utilize your money. Me and Molly spoke about liquidities in the last Neptune video. Are we going to put our money into, you know, as a people, are we going to put it into crypto for a minute? Is that going to hold value for us while the dollar kind of collapses further? You know, obviously there's the stocks, you know, and all that goes up and down and is mostly volatile. Some of it's not. And there's new things, of course, occurring, new technologies, some, you know, some great, some not so great, right? As I've spoken about continuously, the idea of the digital avatar. Where are we putting our power? Are we sitting in the sunlight every day with our feet on the earth and making sure we're connecting? Or are we putting our energy into the screens and building up our digital avatars? We're all doing a little of both.
Totally.
You know? I mean,
But it's that awareness. Like I love when you shared that about the more you identify with your digital avatar. I forgot what you said, but you're like the more disconnected you get from your spirit. And I feel like that's a really powerful.
it's all balance, you know, it's really all balance and making sure that you're doing things every day to hold the balance. It's all individual, you know what I mean? It's all choice. It's all up to our own sense of what we need and to watch our own boundaries. So yeah, so I'll just go into now, just for next time for you guys. So just for a minute, I'm just going to share the idea of the Pluto interregnum. And I'll go into it. Me and Molly will go into it in another video because it's not a light experience that we're going to be going through in this sense. Let me share the screen. So I'm going to share a human design mandala. And this mandala here, you guys can see that the astrological signs are here, these numbered gates. And then you see also the I Ching lines, variation of all the different lines. This relates to the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. And then you have these 64 gates, and that's overlaid by the astrological signs. The Pluto interregnum is a process that occurs from 1781 to 2027. 2027 will be its completion. So in 1781, it started in a specific
Are you cut out?
couple years. Okay, so this starts, the Pluto interregnum starts in 1781, and it started in gate 41 of Aquarius. That's over here in this area where the little human design body graph is looking, and it's going to be ending here, and it will complete this cycle around 2027. I didn't check the month, but for when we do the video, I'll make sure I have the month and the day. And it's a big deal. It's the revolution of Pluto through the human design mandala body graph.
Wow.
And we'll be observing, we are now, but we'll be observing for the transition of the right angle cross of planning to the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is also activating gate 55 in the solar plexus